Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic is domestic violence. Recently, I sat down with Robin Gauthier, the executive director of Samaritan House, which offers help to victims of domestic violence in and around Virginia Beach. She talked about how COVID-19 took the problem to a whole new level and about the increased attention to traumatic brain injuries. So, Robin, what have you seen as far as domestic violence during COVID and in these recent months since the Omicron surge has sort of dissipated? Have you seen any difference in the number of women needing help?
So when the pandemic started in the early years, we had definitely an increase in demand for our services. With the stay-at-home orders and more families being home together and not being at work and children not being at school, there was less reporting of child abuse and less reporting of domestic violence to the police, but more so people were calling us for shelter services. And so they were wanting to get out of their home or get out of their situation because they were in a dangerous situation. And so when it came about that we started doing more separating families and not having people as close as 6 feet, and living together became more of an issue. So we had to use a lot of hotel services to decrease how many people we put in shelters. So our demand was rising, but our shelter space was, getting a little smaller and smaller because we didn't want to put so many people in together. Based on social distancing and recommendations from the CDC. So our demand was rising and our shelter was shrinking, and so we had to use a lot of emergency hotel motel use to the expense of over $100,000 in that first year. And now in the second year of the pandemic, we're also using about $100,000 worth of hotel motel space because of that demand.
So you're saying it's sort of a combination. You can't really have people close together because of distancing rule, but also there is actually more domestic violence taking place. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think the severity of domestic violence has increased. The calls that we're getting are increased severity. So what we do when we talk to victims on our hotline is do a lethality assessment, and it's a screening tool to determine how dangerous your relationship is.
So you're saying sometimes people call you and then you ask them these questions over the phone?
Yes.
What are some of the questions? Are you allowed to share them?
We ask questions such as, are you pregnant? Because domestic violence seems to increase in lethality if the victim is pregnant. Is the abuser currently using drugs or alcohol? That can also increase the lethality in a situation. So it's screening questions similar to that have been, tried and true, tested through the years that we know through research, that these are indicators of high lethality.
So you're saying that coronavirus, the pandemic, the lockdowns, the unemployment, just all the many things that went along,
yes.
The stress that we all felt during the pandemic sort of manifests itself in increased abuse. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, when there's an increase of family stress, and specifically when there's an increase of alcohol consumption, that's when we see an increase in domestic violence. And so we have seen trends through the years. We can even tell you throughout the summer, our numbers rise considerably to our hotline and our demand because there's more drinking and outside barbecues and more people hear arguments and fighting that are happening when people are outside, and so more gets reported. The police are called more often, and then we're needed more often. But throughout the pandemic, I think there was extreme family stress. People that lost jobs or decreased their ability to work. There was a big increase in when people are home together more often versus being separated at work. They were home and on top of each other more, and the children were home doing school from home, and that was very stressful.
So talk about some of the things that domestic abuse victims endure.
Yeah, so we get reports of everything from emotional abuse to physical abuse to financial abuse. manipulating the children, going through custody battles, and using the children as a weapon and a threat. But physical abuse, everything from slaps, hits, kicks, punched, using weapons, knives, guns, and so the whole gamut. And the longer someone's in a domestic violence relationship, the worse the abuse gets over time. And so if we can get people to understand if they can get out of that relationship sooner than later, it won't get to the point where someone is severely injured or killed, because 30% of homicides are due to domestic violence. And so we want to do everything we can to stop that abuse early on in a relationship.
We're going to take a quick break and be right back to tell you more about what's being done to address domestic violence today. In the meantime, if you are a victim of domestic violence, know that there are people standing by willing to help you. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline 24/7 at 800-799-7233 or text START to 88788. You can also log on to thehotline.org to chat with someone live or get more information. We'll be right back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back to Healthy Living. Let's go back to my interview with domestic abuse expert Robin Gauthier. So you mentioned children growing up in a home where there is violence. How does that affect them, especially as they become adults? Is it true that people who are abusers witnessed or were victims of abuse as children?
Yeah, so some recent studies have shown us that some children may become abusers, but most of them are not. Most of the children that are witnesses of domestic violence have really become traumatized, very much like our war veterans. They're in a home with people that are supposed to love and care and nurture them. And what happens is they're living in a war zone when there is domestic violence occurring on a daily or weekly basis. And so the earlier we can intervene with children that have been exposed to witnessing domestic violence, the better. We have a comprehensive children's program here. We do 3 assessments on every child that comes through our doors, and we look at their developmental abilities, we look at their trauma symptoms, and we intervene with services as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. So I loved how you talked about how women who are afraid to leave because of the money.
Yes.
And obviously abusers use money to keep the victims with them.
Yes.
So it's really, we need to shout from the rooftops that there is financial help.
Yes.
And if you're staying because you don't have any money, or you can't imagine how you would pay bills or make it on your own, there is help.
Absolutely.
So people should just reach out. How do people know, you know, things get muddled in your mind when you've been with an abuser, and reality sort of starts to shift because abusers tend to tell their victims what they think is true isn't true.
Yes.
And so a lot of people might not even realize they're in an abusive relationship, especially when, let's say, a man hits you and then the next day he brings you roses and chocolates.
Yes. Yeah, that's well known in the field about a cycle of domestic violence. There is a build-up period where there's maybe some fighting, some emotional abuse, and then there's the outbreak where the perpetrator may hit a person or injure a person, and then they feel real guilty, and they, you know, want to make up with them to keep them in the relationship, because no one typically would stay if they're getting hurt all the time.
How does a person know they're being abused?
Yes.
You know, if he hits you one time, oops, I didn't mean it. You know, what are, it sometimes can be, and sometimes, as you say, abuse doesn't even necessarily need to be physical. Yeah, I know. And you know, it's very difficult when you're talking to someone on the phone and they're experiencing it. And you know, it's really up to that person to determine when enough is enough. So talk about some other behaviors. You mentioned control. How does that manifest itself?
Yes, well, certainly emotional abuse. Telling a person they'll never make it on their own without you. You'll never find another boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. I'm the only person for you. You know we were meant to be together and no one else can do it. No one else can be your partner. Any type of emotional abuse like that. And a person loses their confidence over time when they're told that again and again and again. And when you lose your confidence, you lose your hope, and it's difficult to think of another alternative, another way out. But we also see a lot of financial abuse. I'm not going to let you work. I'm the head of the household. I will do all the work. You will stay at home. And when you stay at home for 20 to 25 years, you have very few opportunities if you haven't had, you know, an established career, an established education. So oftentimes they'll want them to be financially dependent on them, because that's another way to control. Putting all of the vehicles and all of the bills and everything in your name. If you leave, you know, I'm cutting off the electricity. I'm cutting you off from the bank account. I'm cutting you off from using the credit card. And so that can be very scary to someone.
And that's abuse.
That is financial abuse. Yes, yes.
It's not normal.
It is not normal. It is not normal. So financial abuse is huge, emotional abuse, physical
and then cutting,
abuse.
You were mentioning earlier, cutting you off from your social network.
Yes.
Your family and your friends.
Keeping you isolated, absolutely, yes. You know, saying things like I need to be your best friend. You don't need anyone else. You don't need to call anyone else. You don't need to text anyone. You text me. You call me. I will be there for you 100% of the time. And so that cuts off the social network, cuts off any person or friend or family member that they would go out to reach out for help. When you isolate them, they're less likely to reach out for help. And so that's just another way to control and keep control over that victim.
We'll stop there just for a moment and be right back with more of my interview with Robin after this break. But just a reminder, if you are a victim of domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline 24/7 at 800-799-7233 or text START to 88788. You can also log on to thehotline.org to chat live or get more information. Stay tuned for more on this topic right after this break.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times best-selling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Welcome back to Healthy Living. Let's get you back to my discussion about domestic abuse with Robin Gauthier. I wanted to talk about some of the most severe types of abuse, and that is head injuries.
Yes.
We've heard so much over the years, the last decade or so, about the scourge of head injuries to football players. And then later we were realizing this is actually the CTE and the traumatic brain injuries to military personnel too.
Yes.
A lot of red flags there. And then only recently people started saying, but wait a second, abused women are likely hit in the head way more than football players or even the military. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, absolutely. I just read a recent study that said of the women who are victims of domestic violence, 92% report that they're getting head injuries or punched in the head on a daily or weekly basis. And so what we've done at Samaritan House is linked ourselves with the Virginia Department of Health and the Brain Injury Association. And we do assessments for every woman that comes into our program and ask her some survey questions to see what types of injuries she's had or symptoms she's had from, possibly being punched in the head or slapped or hit, where, she could have some traumatic brain injury from that.
We need more data on women who have experienced traumatic brain injury from domestic abuse. Yes. But what we're seeing so often, and I'm guessing you've seen it a lot too, is women lie when they go to the hospital.
Oh, yes.
And say they receive these injuries in some other way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Two things. It's very shameful to say that you're in a relationship. Sometimes women carry so much shame they don't want to tell anyone. It's embarrassing, and so sometimes they just don't want to tell. And then the other thing is sometimes it's dangerous if they do tell. If they do tell what's going on and then they're going back home to that abuser, they're going to get hurt even worse. And so, not knowing if their abuser could be immediately arrested and put in jail and they would be safe, that doesn't happen often. And so they're very afraid to tell because the second incident of abuse could be worse. And so I certainly understand why survivors are afraid to tell.
A lot of times outsiders look at domestic abuse victims and don't have a lot of sympathy for them because they're like, hey, this is America, just leave. Yeah. Why don't they just leave?
Yeah.
And what do you say to the general public who say, it's their own fault if they subject themselves to this?
Uh-huh. So why do we keep abusing them is my question. No one's saying that again and again. They're saying, why don't you leave? But why are they being allowed to abuse is my question. Typically, perpetrators get in multiple relationships with victims. They're not just abusing one victim and then being prosecuted. That's not the end of it. Typically, they'll move on to someone else. And so we really need to focus more on the question of why are perpetrators being allowed to abuse and why aren't they going to jail more often for longer lengths of time so they don't continue cumulatively to, hurt other people. But for victims, why don't I leave? It's dangerous. The studies show that most women die from domestic violence during separation when they leave, because the perpetrator has lost control. That person is leaving the relationship, and so they're going to up the ante to try to keep them in the relationship, and they may increase their severity of abuse, even death. And so death usually occurs when someone's leaving. So yeah, I'd be scared to leave, right? So that's why you have to do really good safety planning on how to get out. If a relationship has gotten to the point where you're being severely injured on a regular basis, it could really move to being severely injured or killed. And so we want people to get out sooner and call for help and make that safety plan with someone.
We're going to take one last break and be back with some moments of this important interview. Again, National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. We'll be right back.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible, yes, Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link. Tuesday morning at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Stay connected with CBN News all day across our platforms.
We're back to wrap up this discussion about domestic abuse with expert Robin Gauthier. Once again, if people are watching this show and they're like, okay, I'm going to do it, I'm going to leave, what should they do? They need to have a plan. Don't tell the perpetrator you're leaving.
Correct.
That's the main thing, because then he'll react. So make a plan in secret, yes, and then do it one day. Who do they call for help?
Yes, they can call a myriad of numbers. If they don't have a safe friend or family member to go to and they need a safe shelter, they can call locally here in Virginia Beach. They can call Samaritan House at 430-2120 and speak 24 hours a day to a hotline worker on our hotline and speak to someone, do a really good safety plan, and ask for emergency shelter and whatever services you may need. And then there's 1-800 numbers, the statewide hotline and the national hotline. So depending on where you live, there's always a number you can call for help. But in that safety plan, take your important documents with you. Even if you have to start packing a few days before and stash them in your car or stash them with a friend or family member, take important documents. Take your children with you, pack for them anything they need for school or things like that. And if you're leaving and you get trapped in a situation, try to get out of the house. Don't get trapped in the bedroom or get trapped in the bathroom where there's hard surfaces where someone can close the door and detain you. So just try really hard to get out of that situation. And even if you have to do what the abuser is asking you and comply for a short amount of time, save your life and do that, and then make another plan to get out.
What is your final pitch to women to leave? I mean, I would just want them to know that it's better on the outside. It's better if you leave. And so many people are just afraid, and they don't believe that they just really want to take that step.
Yeah. I would say, you know, we understand. We understand how hard it is to make that move. We want you to be safe. We don't want you to make that move before you're ready, because we don't want anyone to be killed during a separation. So know that there's hope, know that there's a way out, and call and make a plan, and you will be safe. It can be done. I see it every single day.
Do you ever, just from a Christian standpoint, hear people say, well, I can't leave him because, you know, the Bible, God hates divorce?
Yeah. We do hear that, and we definitely refer people back, you know, to their pastor or to their someone in the church who does counseling for things like that. Or we recommend Christian counseling for that. If they want to speak to a Christian counselor, we can actually pay for any types of those services that people require. We have counselors here on site, but if they want a particular type of counselor, like a Christian counselor, we can help with that, and we actually pay for those services here at Samaritan House. So yeah, we do hear that often, and it breaks my heart, because I don't think God wants people to stay with abusive people, but sometimes they do have those faith traditions, and we respect that, and we have to respect that.
And a lot of pastors will say, actually, there are some scriptures that do allow for a woman to leave a situation that's unsafe for her.
Absolutely. And we can do training with any of those pastors. We have, you know, some curriculum based on people of faith and what types of training that they want so that they can assist their congregation or faith group. You know, it's real important that everyone knows about domestic violence, because no one wants someone to die just because they're staying in a relationship where they think they have to. Yes.
Any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate it. We're so happy to get the word out because we just want everyone to know that there's a way out. We would like to see the decrease of domestic violence deaths, intimate partner violence. Over time, we would really like to see a decrease. So we need to get the word out, educate the public, and educate anyone who can be a bystander and help a victim.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. Once again, if you are a victim of domestic abuse, know there are people standing by willing to help you. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline 24/7 at 800-799-7233 or text START to 88788. You can also log on to thehotline.org to chat live or get more information. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Hope to see you again next week. Until then, take care, everyone.